For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Sashnee Moodley. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
Now, the High Court recently ruled that National Director of Public Prosecutions Shaun Abraham should vacate his position, yet he has given Zuma extended his deadline to make representation on corruption charges. Do you think that this adds to the Shaun the Sheep persona, and do you think that this shows the grip that Zuma has on the NPA?
When I first read that, I thought, his guy has got 60 days left in his office unless the appeal sets it aside. And they may well refuse leave to appeal, and they may say that he must vacate office immediately. I don't know exactly whether they can ensure that. What I think the court made clear is that they did not regard Abrams as being independent. But I think the more important thing is to go back to what did the decision signify? And the decision related to the resignation of Nkosana as head of the NPA and him getting a 17 million payout. Now, from the court judgment, Zuma misled the court by suggesting that Nkosana had asked to be removed. In fact, he hadn't been asked, and they kept on plying him with more and more money to get him to resign. And the basis on which he resigned was a payment which they were not authorized to give, and in the eyes of the court, Nkosana was not, would have known that it was illegal to receive this. So that the judgment said that the removal of Nkosana was illegal. Consequently, the appointment of Abrams was to a position that ought not to have been vacant. Now, the usual way in which the court would have, the law would have operated is that Nkosana would have gone back to his job and Abrams would have gone back to wherever he was in the prosecution service. But there were two problems. One was Nkosana was himself compromised in this process, and the normal result whereby the court orders him back to his that he be reinstated could not be applied because of the way he had conducted himself, which was also compromised the legality in the exchanges between him and the presidency, in the sense that, as they said, the presidency just kept on dangling more and more money, thinking that he had a price that he would be prepared to go with. And in the case of Abrams, they said he couldn't remain there because, first of all, he's not there legally in the first place, but secondly, he had shown himself in a number of the court cases to be hanging on the coattails of the presidency, to not be independent, to join with the presidency in appeals and all sorts of things. And many of these appeals, you will recall, were frivolous in the sense that when it got to the Supreme Court of Appeal, Zuma's counsel admitted that they didn't have a case, but they tagged along the NPA on these things. So the thing of the lack of independence of Abrams, Zuma, according to most understandings of lawyers that I read, seems to be that Zuma doesn't have a case to argue against the reinstitution of the charges. Now, the court itself in North Gauteng really said there's no reason why this shouldn't just go ahead. They're getting they actually getting impatient with Zuma stretching things out as much as possible, and they link this with the fact that knowing that he wants to stretch this out as possible, you have to have someone as head of the NPA who will make a decision that will not be swayed by what Zuma wants. So I do think it confirms the fact that Abrams is not suitable, but the judgment's importance is much more significant than that. And there are other judgments coming up soon. There's a judgment coming up very soon in relation to the appointment of, is the president the only person who can appoint a judge to head a commission? Now that raises the same principles as have been raised in this case. So that it's going to be a heavy week. I think it's this week, this judgment. Heavy week for Zuma.
Now, Zuma has a history of missing deadlines.
Yes.
And this time around, it's not clear what will happen if he fails to make representations in this matter. Also, given the fact that Sean Abraham's days are numbered. What do you think about that?
My guess is that they will allow they will try, given the high-profile nature of the case, they will try to accommodate Zuma as much as possible in terms of giving him a hearing. Or let's say if they challenge the NPA, if Abrams makes a decision to withdraw charges, I don't think he can do it in 60 days, but it could stretch on if the appeal is allowed. So he's operating on multiple fronts. He's appealing against this North Gauteng judgment, and Abrams may well want to give him an opportunity, and then other parties will challenge that failure to prosecute. So it may stretch out. And I think the courts will be reluctant in so high-profile a case not to give it a hearing, even if they dismiss it in the end. So in the end, Zuma is going to lose, I think, not because he's late on representations, but they will give it, once you get to the Supreme Court of Appeal or the Constitutional Court. I mean, the Supreme Court of Appeal, you've got this Judge Nafsa. I mean, I would hate to appear before him because he is so systematic and demolishes arguments so thoroughly. It's very impressive. And the Chief Justice and these other judges have shown that they are not going to deal with nonsense. So in the end, he'll lose. So I don't know when that will be.
So you're confident that they will bring back charges?
Yeah, but it may take long, you see.
Okay.
That's my guess. You see, some people may want to get a package deal whereby the charges are dropped, but you can't do that in a constitutional state. You know, there's the story of give him 2 billion and this, and then he'll go away, but you must make the charges go away. Now Mugabe, the agreement with Mugabe included immunity from prosecution. Now you can't do that in South Africa unless there's a whole lot of procedures that have to be followed, and the courts are not going to entertain that sort of thing.
Do you think it's easier or harder to prosecute Zuma once he leaves the presidency?
It's easier to prosecute him after he leaves the presidency because the various officers who are loyal to him, who depend on him for their job, will now depend on a new president. Even Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma will have to show, or want to show, that she's not just a puppet of her former husband.
Now, the court also ruled that Zuma cannot appoint an NDPP and that Ramaphosa has the power.
Yes.
Well, he has 60 days to appoint someone. Do you think this is necessarily bad news for Zuma, given that Ramaphosa basically has the power now?
Well, what they said, that if the president has a power and he has a conflict of interest in exercising those power, he cannot act as president for purposes of that decision. And it may be challenged whether that should be the deputy president. However, that is not good for Zuma, because Ramaphosa will appoint someone who will do the job competently and not bend the rules for Zuma, which these others, I mean, Zuma asks, you know, this chap Abrams is a very junior prosecutor, so he's probably very intimidated. Now, if you go and appoint, under him, you've got people like Billy Downer, SC, from the 2009 period when he opposed the dropping of the charges. If you appointed someone of that caliber, it would be very different.
Now, lastly, Ramaphosa hasn't responded to the court's ruling that he should appoint someone in 60 days. Should we be reading something into this?
Well, it's too soon. There's still appeals on the go. 60 days haven't elapsed. And I don't know whether I can't recall now, whether possibly he's thinking about who to appoint. But I mean, it would be inappropriate for him to comment on that now in this week when he's running for the presidency of the ANC.
Do you think that the conference will take time out of this decision?
Take time out of this?
Yeah, for them to make this decision.
No. I mean that he would think that it's not it's not appropriate to be talking about this, which is really outside a decision that must be made in good faith outside of political affiliations. So that would be his reason for keeping quiet now. And in any case, there are a lot of other legal actions going on.
Thanks for speaking with us, Professor.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about Zuma's legal woes.